So we've been telling you for a long time about the drone strikes and how they're counterproductive and how they kill civilians. In fact, the Bureau of Investigative Journalism says that we have killed anywhere between 558 to 1,119 civilians in Pakistan, Yemen, and Somalia alone. And they're being very conservative in their estimates. In fact, I just read an article about how there was one strike in North Waziristan alone where we killed 40 civilians. Of course, the government, it was in 2011, immediately came out and said, oh, no, those were all militants. When the New York Times, The Guardian, the Bureau of Investigative Journalism went down there, they're like, no, they were definitely civilians. So it's just not true. In fact, Stanley McChrystal, who used to run our campaign in Afghanistan, he even said, quote, the resentment created by American use of unmanned strikes is much greater than the average American appreciates. Well, that is certainly true. And that's some of our top generals, of course, in this case, former general, telling us that. Now, he's not the only one. Pentagon General Counsel Jay Johnson is retiring. Now, remember, he's the General Counsel to the Pentagon. And he even says, come on, man, these wars are endless. Quote, now that efforts by the U.S. military against al-Qaeda are in their 12th year, we must also ask ourselves, how will this conflict end? War must be regarded as finite, extraordinary, and in an unnatural state of affairs. We must not accept the current conflict and all that it entails as the new normal. Now, of course, they always say this on their way out, but the reality is the Pentagon completely accepts it as the new normal. They do not view it as an unnatural state of affairs, and they say that there is no end to it. When asked, the Obama administration officials have told the press that the war on terror will continue for at least another 10 years. We don't know what's going to happen in 3 years, 5 years, or 7 years, but it doesn't really matter because we have always been at war. George Orwell tried to warn us. I think they took it as a manual for what to do, unfortunately. Matthew Rosenberg from the New York Times says, but behind it all, many senior coalition and Afghan officials are now considering that after nearly 12 years of war, the view of foreigners held by many Afghans has come to mirror that of the Taliban. Hope has turned into hatred, and some will find a reason to act on those feelings. To which I say, of course, they don't even remember why we're there. My favorite poll was done in an area of Afghanistan where they asked, why are the U.S. soldiers here? And they asked them about 9/11. And I believe it was less than 10% that knew what 9/11 was. They think that we're just there to occupy them, that we're a foreign army, so they're fighting us. We're in their valley. They fight anybody that comes in their valley, whether it's the Russians or the Persians or Alexander the Great or the Americans. So of course they've forgotten what we're fighting for. 9/11 was so long ago. The people who did 9/11 aren't in Afghanistan. We killed one of them in Pakistan. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is in custody. This doesn't have anything to do with 9/11 anymore. It has to do with endless war. Glenn Greenwald, as usual, explains it best. Quote, as always, the U.S., through their very policies of aggression and militarism, justified in the name of terrorism, is creating the very terrorists those policies are supposedly designed to combat. It's a pure and perfect system of self-perpetuation. Now think about that. If you wanted endless wars, and you're, as an example, a defense contractor who profited off those endless wars, and you can look at their stock prices before Iraq War and after the Iraq War and see for yourself. They made tremendous profits, and they gained tremendous value because of those wars. What would you do? Would you perhaps be interested in creating a situation where we never quite finish the war? Now look, I don't think it's a conspiracy in that they get together in a room, and on this one I might be wrong, but I don't think they get together in a room and say, hey, you know what, let's do the constant drone strikes so that we turn people in Pakistan and Yemen into terrorists and they fight us and they bomb us and we start a whole nother war. But they do somehow convince themselves that what is profitable for them is the right course of action. We must be ever vigilant in going after the terrorists, and you know those terrorists, they are endless, right? So we had to do those drone strikes. What could we do? And you know, like sometimes we're not sure it's a terrorist. It's a signal strike where we don't know who it is. But better safe than sorry. But that isn't safe. It's just sorry. Glenn continues. If you are a U.S. leader or an official of the national security state or a beneficiary of the private military and surveillance industries, why would you possibly want the war on terror to end? That would be the worst thing that could happen. It's that war that generates limitless power, impenetrable secrecy, and unquestioning citizenry and massive profit. Now, those things are true. You can draw any conclusion you like from them if you think, you know, oh, come on, the defense contractors wouldn't do that. The guys at the Pentagon, who almost all at the high levels get paid a tremendous amount of money from the defense contractors as soon as they retire, they wouldn't take that into consideration. And all those people that give money to the politicians, those same defense contractors, those politicians wouldn't take that money into consideration. You might be right, you might also be wrong. And Glenn also points out what Cicero said. Quote, in times of war, the law falls silent. And think about this. If the war never ends, that means the law is always silent. That we don't have to follow the law, we don't have to follow the Constitution. The new law is lawlessness. And to that point, my final quote is from Senator Ron Wyden, who is outraged that we can actually execute U.S. citizens abroad without a trial. And that even if United States congressmen actually ask for those records, do you know that if the congressman or the courts ask for the legal opinion that allows the executive branch to execute a U.S. citizen without a trial, they say, sorry, that's top secret. We can't even share it with the people's representatives or the judges that will be judging us in the cases that are brought forward. Does that sound like a democracy to you? Senator Wyden says this situation is unacceptable for the executive branch to claim that intelligence agencies have the authority to kill American citizens, but refuse to provide Congress with any and all legal opinions that explain the executive branch's understanding of this authority represents an alarming and indefensible assertion of executive prerogative. He's only 100% right about that. We've got to stop this madness. It doesn't make us any safer. It makes us less safe. It costs us a tremendous amount of money. That money goes somewhere. Those people are very happy about that situation. The rest of us should be incredibly unhappy about that situation. And then finally, to add insult to injury, they then also use the war as an excuse to take away our fundamental rights. We've got to fight back.